Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Evilwest, Evil Difficulty, No Healing walkthrough. We're about to enter Chapter 5, but before we do that, there's going to be a little interim here as we navigate the home base, and I look around trying to find bags of gold. So this game is a lot more fun when you have all the tools, I think we can all agree. If you've ever played DevilNeverCry, if you play DevilNeverCry without any of the upgrades, it's not the most interesting combat system, it's not the most interesting game. You know, many games suffer from this. Even the mighty Doom Eternal at the beginning suffers from it when they remove everything from you, and it takes till the Super Gore nest to get everything back. It is a progression system that's meant to make it feel like you're constantly learning and constantly adapting and constantly being buffed and powered up, but for a lot of people it can be a little bit off-putting. I absolutely can understand that criticism, and I think that Evilwest can be criticised in this way. That being said, I think this game is a lot more about how you creatively use your tools than the tools that you actually have. And I can't wait for people to start unlocking all the abilities and getting all the items towards the end of the game and realising what this game truly has to offer for those who are too limited to realise that you can have a lot of fun with very little. But we're moving into a beautiful environment here. I really like the areas that look like this. This is the traditional Western, and anything that looks like a traditional Western to me is always a good thing. However, of course, we have the tinge of Gothic horror. It is a Gothic Western, so this is never going to last too long, but until it gets interrupted by demons and all kinds of nefarious familiars, we're going to take this moment to just really feel like a traditional gunslinger, in spite of looking more like an Inquisitor from Warhammer 40,000. But you want to always be moving around the area to find the little offshoots from the path. This is a very linear game, but there are areas to explore, and if you explore, you'll get more currency. If you acquire more currency, you can buy things sooner. And my only criticism of the currency is the fact that for some reason they've level locked a lot of it, and some of it you even have to find. And they did this great thing in this game where they allowed you to buy the upgrades you wanted without having to buy them in a sequence, which is something that I've always hated in video games when you have to buy 5 life upgrades to get a damage upgrade. This game doesn't have that, but they ruin it by making it so that the upgrades you might want you probably won't get until a chest in Mission 12. And then if it's not in a chest in Mission 12, you've got to be level 15 to buy it. And if the developers ever listen to this, thank you for sending me a copy of the game. I love your game, it's fantastic. Fuck those reviews calling it boring, the bad players. But fundamentally, I wish you could have put some kind of system where we could overwrite the leveling or the absence of the item so that a good player can focus their build really early, save up a ton of money and buy a move they love. Because to me, that's the ultimate option. I want to be able to choose things that I'm going to enjoy, and I'm going to enjoy that more than anything else, and it simply doesn't exist. But this is werewolves, and werewolves are interesting. They're very durable and they're very evasive, and they dodge your bullets a lot. However, if you knock them down, they can't dodge the gun anymore. So use your tools, parry them, knock them back, or do what everyone else is going to do, and pull them towards you with the zapper and then cannonball them into their friends. But when you engage these fellas, the moment they hit the deck, you can shoot them with anything, and you want to use this to your advantage, because they dodge your rifle really well. And if you're heavy on the rifle as a playstyle like I am, you're going to notice that they do it a ton. But keep your space, keep your eyes on them, and they like to do 2 different jumps. Luckily, you can get away with murder on some of these jumps, and that move right there, whenever he goes down and there's the weak point above him, it means he's going to do a temporary buff where all his buddies get like glam haircuts and they start being really aggressive. And it's a really cool move, which I wish they did it a bit more to kind of put the impetus on you. One of the weaknesses of this difficulty, which is to do with the balancing, is that the enemies aren't really aggressive enough. And they're aggressive enough for the way the game works and the way the developers intended it to be. But if you've played God Hand, if you've played, God of War 2 on Titan, if you've come from games where enemies are constantly attacking repeatedly and it's super cranked, this game does feel a lot more meticulous. It feels a lot more strategic because the enemies run towards you, do one attack, and then they wait a little bit before they do anything. And you can tell that the developers have really messed around with these features to make sure that it doesn't feel cheap. But the issue when you have a game where, the hardest difficulty doesn't have some of these less fair elements is that it will never be as demanding as it could have been if you cranked some of these settings. And it wouldn't surprise me, guys, because Shadow Warrior got this, I think. It wouldn't surprise me if they released an additional difficulty and they made it even worse. because I thought coming off of hard, the evil difficulty was going to be really, really hard, and it wasn't really up to the points that I've been on. However, the issues I have with the game, the big one for me is the bosses. I don't like the bosses at all. They look visually nice, there's some interesting stuff going on, but you have to cycle them way too much, even when you optimize damage and use all your tools. And I'm a player that does no upgrades, I'm a player that does incredibly limited challenge runs. I have no interest in fighting the bosses under those restrictions because they just take too long. And it's boring. You know, it is boring. They're not that interesting, they're not that unique, and once you've learnt the three things they do, you just have to repeat it, and then there's waves of enemies, and waves of enemies, and waves of enemies, and it... To me, I should never be on a boss fight going, wow, this is lasting a little bit too long. And that's every boss in this game. And I'm not talking about introducing the big enemies where you fight them 1v1. They're fine. I'm talking about the proper bosses where it's a little bit higher concept. Those things are just lame. And I'm sure somebody likes them, because somebody always does. But I didn't have any fun fighting them. And I've got some pretty good strategies to help you completely delete them, but even then you still have to go through 3 cycles of waves, you know? There's always going to be 3 lots of enemies and there's nothing you can really do, and I've learnt to sequence break enemies in this game where it completely stops spawns from happening, but some of these bosses are so rigid and so lame and so lengthy because they're so bloated that there doesn't seem to be anything you can really do. And the build that I'm going to be focusing on, guys, I think is going to end up being probably the strongest build in the game. And it's with the electricity. So you'll notice that when that health orb dropped, it dropped an electric orb as well. The electric orbs fill your batteries, and you get them from certain things if you have certain upgrades. The upgrades I'm going to recommend, guys, are when health drops, make it turn into energy, because it's way more efficient and useful than using life, because you can always use the heal if you're healing. And then you'll fill the batteries, and you'll get access to your superpowered mode a lot more frequently. The second move is when you kill an enemy in midair, they will drop electricity guaranteed. This move is going to work in conjunction with the previous move, and it's going to mean that you can almost always go into your superpowered up mode. And I can't begin to tell you how useful that mode is. It's the kind of mode that you'd normally see me not using, but in this game, it's essential for shutting down the frustrating aspects of the game. There's a monster coming up later on that flies around with these eggs, and the eggs protect it, and it fires bees at you. And when I first fought it, I hated it, because I just thought it was really shitty. And if you use that feature correctly, you can kill him on a 1 cycle. And on my first playthrough, I was doing 4 cycles on that monster, and I was really frustrated. So if you do the right things, guys, and you follow my instructions, you're going to delete these things just by using this incredibly powerful tool. And you're going to need it as well, because later on you go to an oil field, and he's there in a small room with a bunch of vampires, and it's by far one of the most difficult fights in the game because you can't move. And if you do what I'm going to show you, you delete him. And you really need to, because again, I cycled him about 4 or 5 times. It was miserable. And I've done some pretty fucking miserable stuff, guys. You should see the Metal Gear Rising project you're gonna be getting after this one. It is a ridiculous run that is so brutal that I don't expect anybody to try it. But it's certainly something, and I'd rather do that than some of the really boring things in this, because to me, I like challenge, and I like it when it's hard, and I like it when it sucks, as long as it feels like there's something I can engage with. But when you give me some really passive-aggressive, flying, cheesy enemy that's got too much life, I don't want to deal with that, you know? And it's just the HP. I think that monster, when you stun it, you should be able to kill it. I don't think you should have to cycle it multiple times. For how dangerous it is when it flies and for how protected it is, you should be able to just put it down when you finally get through its shield. Like these guys, this is a really hard fight. It's not going to look like it, but I struggled here longer than any fight thus far, because at the very beginning, you get shot, and those guns are really strong, and then it spawns a bunch of werewolves with a bunch of flyers, and eagle-eyed viewers will notice that I'm not pulling the flyers. Pulling the flyers is the most powerful thing you can do to them, and it almost immediately kills them. But instead I wanted to show you that there's some other tools you can use to take them on, which is fanning the revolver and then shooting them with a rifle on their weak point. You know, there are multiple ways to play this game, guys. You can get very creative, even when you don't have many tools. But 3 werewolves now, and I just have to be careful. And it's probably time I talked about the kick. The kick is really good if it works, and I hate to have to say that, but it's true. Every so often you'll kick a move, and previously you kicked a move and it worked, and this one it doesn't work on. So, part of your toolset with the kick is learning which moves you can kick and which ones you can't. Usually, anything that glows red can be kicked because it's designed to be kicked, but you can kick standard attacks too. I learnt the hard way that every so often there'll be a big enemy that'll do a move and you'll kick it and he just punches you in the face. Which is unfortunate because I love the kick, I think it's really interesting. It would be nice if you could do more with it, maybe you can, I don't have the upgrades yet. But we'll just electric combo this guy, knock him up, slam him into the ground, then get the energy. And that's the cool thing about the ground slam there, guys. The ground slam will count as an aerial kill, I believe, and you'll get the energy from it. One of the good ways to get your air kill, if you're particularly struggling, knock them into the air, fan the revolver on them in midair, and then shoot them with the shotgun. And there's something that's worth noting. I don't have the upgrades to shoot enemies in midair and get the juggle state that you can get from the upgrade. You don't need it, though, to do air combos. It makes air combos a lot more viable, but you can just do it normally by using timing and then going to other things. So, I'm not saying don't buy it, I'm just saying don't think you can't do it if you don't buy it, you know? And now we get to move forward and take on the boss we killed in a previous level, who's back with some ads. And he's really beefy. And we need to talk about this because somebody's complained in this game that it doesn't have many enemies, that the enemy variety is not good. And I don't agree with that. I think the enemy variety is okay. I think that they make the mistake of not using certain enemy types enough. And they lean on other enemy types more. So that's definitely a criticism. But there's a lot of enemies in this game, and they're even introducing them towards the end of the game, so this idea that it's got like 3 dudes and that's all you fight, like sometimes fodder is just fodder and it needs to be there, you know? Does anybody complain in Doom that there's imps in fights? So why would you complain here that there's those standard guys, you know? You need them to cannonball on opponents and things. But if you look on his life bar, do you see that yellow bar around the diamond? That yellow bar is a stun meter. But it doesn't work in a conventional manner. It means that when it's full, if you block him, you seemingly get, or maybe if you don't even block him, you seem to be able to stun him with electricity. And if you don't have that, you won't stun him with electricity the same way. So it gives you credence to essentially shut the boss down once you fill it. It's kind of a reward for momentum. This move here, when he jumps at you, if you kick it in midair, you'll shut it down and counter it, but if he lands, the AoE will hit you. And this move right there, if you shoot him in midair, you can shut that move down completely, but for some reason in this early footage I'm respecting it, and you shouldn't do that. So I should just shoot him and it will stop it completely. But instead, I let him do it. And this here, this is a heal. Again, it has to be said, guys, I don't know why this boss has this much life. I just don't think he deserves this much HP. Like, you wail on him for ages, and it doesn't really make much of a difference. I'd cut this guy's life in half, but I'd make the heal way quicker. Because if he's going to heal anyway, and if he's going to get all his life back from a heal if you let him do it, why not just make it really dangerous, but make him vulnerable, you know? Nobody wants to fight this guy for this long. It just doesn't make sense. Like, keep the boss one as a beefy version, because it's the first time you fought him and you need to learn him, but have this guy be a little bit weaker. Like, I would happily have him have half HP and do double damage that he does. If he killed me in one hit with everything, I'd be happy. Because if you're playing this game well, he's not going to hit you. He literally does the same 5 things, and they're all easy to tell what they are, you know? The only reason this enemy is dangerous is because later on they put him with tons of enemies and he's got so much HP. But, like, I don't agree with how beefy he is for what he is. And admittedly, he's a huge, giant, vampire, gargoyle monster. He's very scary, but I don't want to punch him for 2 years, you know? If I wanted to punch things for 2 years, I'd play no more fucking heroes. But, there we go. Get the parry on him. The parry on this enemy to get the electricity is kind of goofy. It feels like the timing on it is way off. And I don't really understand that, but learning the timing on all the different parries is going to be really important because it's going to make you get the electric combos, which are really good. But that's the end of him. Again, guys, don't worry if you struggle on these fights. Fighting these enemies is really useful because they come back later and they're worse. But it does add a dynamic to the fight that's not present here. And I really like the idea of problem solving. And if anybody played Shadow Warrior 3, you have a really good idea of what this game is. This game's enemies, encounters, are a lot like Shadow Warrior 3, where they'll introduce a new monster. This is a new monster right here, it's a mole. and then they'll make you fight it. It'll be a dedicated fight, you won't do very well, and then later on they'll bring it back with other things to create extra additional problems, and they do a really good job of it. It makes me kind of frustrated that people would call it like boring and badly paced and dated. Like there's 2 reviews on YouTube. I'm not going to say who they are. You know who they are. They're terrible reviews. They really are. They're limited imagination from low skill players who for some reason suck the dick of everything else. Like these people said Modern Warfare 2's campaign was good. Modern Warfare 2's campaign, guys, has no gameplay. It is absolutely tedious, like teeth-pulling garbage. It's fucking miserable. I streamed it for about 8 hours before I quit it and uninstalled it, and I'll never play it again. There's no gameplay. You shoot like 5 people. It's badly designed, it's boring, and it's overly serious and pretentious. It spends the whole time smelling its own farts. I don't want a game smelling its own farts. I want a game that lets me play. And this game does, so... Like, that take is so shit. It just... I can't even contemplate a mind that can give God of War a 10 out of 10. God of War Ragnarok, a game where every time I've watched my friend stream it, he's walking around listening to people talk, like, and then say that this game is boring. Like, I'm sorry. It's just absurd. And that's no shade on Ragnarok. Ragnarok is like 50 hours long. It's going to have some narrative, you know? People like the narrative. But I just don't understand it. This enemy is really interesting. I like this monster a lot. I wish he turned up a bit more because he puts pressure on you in a way no other enemy does. Because he can come out of the ground and instantly grab you, and you just kick him when he does it. And it's telegraphed really well because it's a very aggressive burrow when he comes for you. And there he was. But this is a good opportunity to practice timing your attacks so that you get the benefit. And if you watch closely, watch this. Did you see that? That right there is fascinating to me. So, he came out and did a grab, and I kicked it right at the last possible moment, and he actually hit me. It didn't interrupt it, but it didn't deal any damage, because the kick has so much priority that it gave me iframes. I was going to reset then, because I thought that I'd failed, and I wanted to do this level no damage. But if you look at my bar was fine. And that's what's really interesting about this game. It prioritizes precision over like what most games would do. In almost any other action game I've played just then, I would have taken the damage. But in this game, they side with the player. And it's quite rare, that. So, you have way more power than you realise, and the developers thought about this. And that might be a bug, that might be unintended, maybe they didn't think about it and I'm giving them too much credit. But when I saw that, I thought that was really, really interesting. Don't sleep on the kick, guys, it's really good. But that's the end of the level, folks. All that's left to do now is to wander up to the trigger that ends it and then move on to the next part of the game. Thank you all for watching, thank you for supporting. If you want to hear more about the game, pop over to the stream and I'll explain anything that you have to ask. But most importantly, you take care now.